in the den of iniquity. Vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment. What's a pity? Tomorrow never certain. What dwells behind the curtain? The face of evil lurking with the shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble that either pop or topple. Many will fall and stumble. Let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso. Cannons could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come get it. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come get it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.
Oh, yes, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another exciting episode of Case Closed, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, every Sunday, where you get the highest level conversations on the most relevant topics in this space. Yes, the highest level and most relevant. Indeed. And as usual, we got a panel. Today, we're going to be addressing something which is not new these days, right? It's been at least 15 years, some may even say 20 years since the media distribution system has kind of gotten overturned, okay? We're talking about the internet and its ability to put people like Joe Rogan in the mouth of the White House press secretary, or basically, right? The mainstreaming of independent media, and also when it comes to spaces like these spaces, the kinds of talking points or pet topics that they have, the mainstreaming of those ideas and personalities. What is that? Please go ahead and like and share the stream as you come in. Let's start this way, okay? I'm gonna start a little bit on the abstract end of things. So let me ask you this, Kaizo. With regards to the kinds of ends which we have not defined yet, we're not defined, we've not asked what the goals of this space are, in terms of as far as this conversation goes. But one could look at mainstreaming as either cause or effect. In other words, a necessary step to take, or just an effect, maybe an afterglow, or it's inevitable, it has to happen. People are going to look your direction if you have success with regards to getting some ends met, right? So Kaizo, generally speaking, if you could just abstract around this question here, do you see this mainstreaming aspect as more causal, right? It has to happen, it is necessary, or it is an effect, or it just, it might be a distraction, as a matter of fact, if it happens at the wrong time or whatever. If you catch my drift, comment on that generally, if you will.
Yeah, I think generally it works best when it's aligned with the zeitgeist. That's what happened with Kevin Samuels, right? The spirit of the times was around that whole sort of relationship issues in the West. And this actually transcended the Black or White Manosphere and was able to sort of inculcate itself into the general feeling of the average person. I have some friends like Ruth, for example. Her and her whole friends, they used to come up to me.
Let me take a step back, because you mentioned something. And since we're talking about effectiveness, I presume you're talking about within a democracy. Within a democracy, then the zeitgeist matters, because presumably you're going to get these people to vote X, Y, or Z, right? We're not just talking about how you can be successful in the media, right? We're talking about...
No.
Okay. Oh, continue.
Yeah, so the best way is you have to inculcate whatever message that you have to the spirit of the time. So if the spirit is controlling the people and your message is aligned to them, even if it's not what they want to hear, that's when it's, the ears become receptive. And if, again, the ears are receptive, there can be political change, because it's something that actually influences the being, the sense of self, because again, it's the spirit of the time, especially for women, right? In this case, because, well, hey, they are the ones who are easily, or more easily so than us, influenced by, again, spirit of the times. So yeah, if you package it,
let me kind of, I like what you're doing, right? So, but let me again couch it. Number one, democracy, spirit of the times, message will be aligned with it. You do put a lot of, shall we say, weight on the spirit of the times to move people if your message is aligned with it, as opposed to perhaps certain other material conditions, which of course may be the cause of the spirit of the times. But if you're not in control of that, if you don't have some other separate power, let's say like a nuclear weapon pointed at somebody, that'll change their spirit real quick. Speak on, because of, like, for example, in Africa, people always talk about, oh, you have to change the mindset. It's like, okay, is changing the mindset gonna lead to, show me how causally, and I'm not asking you this question, okay? It's gonna lead to certain things falling in line, or is it when you have those things fall in line, people will change their mindset? Because people have been talking about changing mindsets since
Well, you
forever.
need leverage.
So, okay, good. So because you've been talking about the spirit of the times, which are just right. If it's just right and your message gets in there, all the dominoes fall. Maybe that's a caricature of what you've said, but I like it. Let's start there.
Or you have
Okay.
a lever, right? With leverage, you again, the
Yeah,
balancing act, right?
yeah. So, and it's fine because we haven't defined the goals, right? When you talk about the goals, then you're going to talk about the buttons you need to push. You're going to talk about sequences and things like that. But I wanted to just talk about this whole thing in general first. Now, Dr. Thunder, if I were to ask you if the mainstreaming, okay, is a necessary step, or it's a side thing that may or may not happen, and typically will happen if you're successful, but it was not a necessary step. This kind of PR aspect of things being necessary. We haven't talked about the goals yet, but what are your feelings about that, Dr. Thunder?
Yeah, so I don't think it's necessary. I think that all you really need is about 10%. 10% of the population being somewhat aware. And they don't necessarily have to be directly aware. They just somewhat aware. And that's enough to actually push anything into sort of general consciousness. So I don't think it actually requires a sort of quote unquote mainstreaming of the ideas or the topics or whatever. I just think it just needs about 10%. And once you get 10%, that's actually enough. And that's actually one reason why independent media is so effective and so dangerous, is because you don't need a big percentage of folks to buy into it. You just need about 10%. And once you get to 10%, then that's when the major media sources, they start scrambling. And it's like, oh no, what do we do? And they're doing that, oh no, what do we do, based on about 10%. I mean, they started doing it. Now, maybe I could argue that maybe it's more than 10% now. But they first started scrambling when it got to 10%.
So you're talking critical mass, and you're talking about the fact that things happen at the margins. Whenever you have large numbers, and let me just give an example which everyone can relate to, which is basically you're trying to become the president of the United States, you can have 45% going one way, 45% going the other way. That's not going to change, right? And the margins are that 10%. And that's what the same thing with markets and pricing. The same thing, all kinds of things like this happen in the margins where you got to, if you're selling, for example, if you're a salesperson, okay, there's some people who will never buy from you. Okay, let's just call it 20% because, their aunt is their supplier. And then you have another 20% that will buy from you regardless because, they've seen blah, blah, blah. And you're working to move a certain margin on your end. So that is fair. And when we come back to the goals, having defined the goals, then we'll talk about how what this critical mass is supposed to be doing, because it's still kind of vague. And the only reason why critical mass matters is because we're talking about a democracy, right? But anyways, shout out to Mike V. This is the first time you've graced us with your presence, sir. How's it going?
It's going well. Thank you for having me on.
Excellent. So with regards to this question here, is it a necessary step, or is it at best an effect? Is it causal? What are your thoughts?
I think it's a symbolic distraction. If you don't have a framework, a governance structure in place, going mainstream isn't going to actually bring any tangible benefits to the space itself. If you just want to engage people in the general mainstream media, then that and that's your only goal, then talking to people is not going to really gain you any net benefit. It's all symbolic at the end of the day. We've seen several real mainstream media people actually call out the space, and the space doesn't really have a structural response. There's no sort of leadership structure. There's no sort of response structure. There's nothing in place to actually engage the mainstream. The mainstream has their talking points in place. They know who to put on and who not to put on. For example, you had Rush Limbaugh would screen who he let on and who he didn't let on, and how they would engage him. There are pre-planned talking points in place for how you can engage those people in the mainstream. And so the Manosphere does not have a response team, a PR response team. It doesn't have a governance structure. It doesn't have any real sort of systematic policies in place to actually engage anybody outside of the space. And so sometimes
Mike, let me move you a couple steps back to the first thing that you mentioned with regards to certain structures in place. And to my way of thinking, I'm always thinking about fundamental substrates and then emanations, right?
Yep.
The structures in place with regards to getting to certain goals, right? And then for example, your PR firm, let's say you are Tesla, for example. It's good to have a PR firm, but you got to make freaking cars. The PR firm is a byproduct of the fact that you made cars, you sold cars, and now someone is attacking your cars, right? And then you have your PR firm. And in such a situation, your PR firm will be structured. It'll have a message and such. But it is not possible. I'm not putting words in your mouth now, but it would seem to me, based on what you're saying, is if you don't have that car company and all you have is PR, then of course it's not structured, right? But I'll let you land the plane, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, because the Manosphere today does not have any real production value. So what is it really producing other than, talking points? There's nothing it's not grounded on anything. It has no principles that it abides by. I've been in the space since 2007, when what we call Manosphere 1.0. And you did have men who congregated the space, and they were actually having they were leveraging the social space to respond to what the talking points of the day was at the time. But it had variations to it. You had people who responded politically, you had people who responded culturally, and then you had people who responded economically. You had people who responded, artistically as well. You had rappers or somewhat rappers in the space. You had different sort of people in the space that actually took different sort of positions. Today, you don't really have that at this point.
Okay. So shout out to LAR. I'm gonna ask you the question straight up, and then we'll move towards, okay, what are these goals, right? That LAR, okay, mainstreaming. Is mainstreaming necessary, or is it a sideshow? Is it one of those things that, it's inevitable, but that's if you're successful, then people are going to pay attention to you? But on your road to being successful, is mainstreaming one of the main goals with respect to places like the Manosphere and the kinds of goals that they may have? Where do you place mainstreaming here? Necessary or just byproduct?
I think mainstreaming was a byproduct because the goal was to get the message out to as many people as possible. I guess the byproduct of that, it can go mainstream. I would say the downside of that was basic jealousy, because anybody who went mainstream or grew all of a sudden became public enemy number one to the people in the space. But mainstream, mainstream wasn't on this space, in my opinion, because other television stations started gravitating to the topics. Podcasts started gravitating to the topics. Radio stations started gravitating to the topics. Talk shows started gravitating to the topics. So, and the people really were the grassroots of it. So I'm kind of where the mainstream is probably the solid majority actually speaking now. But that's just my thoughts on it.
Got it. So let me just kind of offer a brief kind of overview here, and I want to ask something to MOT here. So Kaizo, you started us off with this abstraction about, well, is it a causal thing, or is it just it's inevitable byproduct and effect, just heat, right? And you said, hey, zeitgeist and matching the message to the zeitgeist is powerful in a democracy. Dr. Thunder came in and said, hey, the critical mass is important when you're talking about mass movements and moving things, particularly one way or the other, right? Mike V emphasized a lack of certain kind of a structure, okay? LAR has come in to tell us that, look, mainstream is a direct side effect of trying to put the message out there as much as possible. As Dr. Thunder alluded to before, when you get to a certain percentage, other people are going to start paying attention, right? And mention some of those social dynamics in there. Now, MOT, what are the goals? Okay, not that what will be it, and try to make it concise of a space like this, because if you don't have that, then talking about where we're going, the message and all those other kinds of things, if it's to stay with my Tesla example, if there are no cars to be built, no actual real world, either political, economic, and what have you type changes to see, then what is the PR firm doing, right? That kind of a thing. So what would be, MOT, the goal of this space?
Okay, the goal of this space using abductive reasoning is very simple. It was for you to build as big a walled garden as you possibly could. And whenever somebody questioned you about the things that you were doing or the overall goal, you could just claim jealousy. What this space was doing was leveraging as much ignorance around these topics as possible and handing them no solutions. So what you had was a bunch of people who were failed men in their own right, because successful men don't talk about the relationship conversation. They move to where the women are who accept successful men. But we took the actual inexperienced men that most of these men actually created within this environment, by the way. So they took the men that they created, and since they knew so much about the production process of the person, they was just looping them around in red pill rage and made it look like that they felt their pain and all this kind of other stuff. And then it just turned into entertainment, and it just pretty much turned into the rap industry. I think some of the music industry people came here with some of the worst looks, but at the end of the day, we know what these people were on. At the end of the day, no one made a move. No one picked a side. There is no if then else. It was just, if we make money, it is verified. And we could just hide behind our collective audiences, because that's the barometer. YouTube analytics is the barometer for success. It doesn't matter if you don't take any of this stuff or do anything with it or anything. It's about building as big an audience as possible. So the overall goal was to leverage productive men like myself and turn around and turn it into a surprise. We're just here to build an audience. And once we build our audience big enough, we're going to quote unquote leave. So that's what happens when you don't have structure. Go ahead, sir.
Can I ask you a question?
Me? Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So, for example, in my case, I met Ike in the Manosphere. I've obviously made loads of money from Ike in the Manosphere, right? And hopefully, I've also added to his whole business experience. But what do you say about the whole sort of okay? You may be right about your points you've made, but what about the point of, like, let's say the causal effects of starting media stations? Because what this has allowed us to do, at least I got a media station. Everybody on this panel has a media station. So shouldn't we then, okay, so Mike V mentioned earlier, okay, there's a lack of standardization, some kind of code or anything like that. Okay, shouldn't we be thinking about standardizing some of these channels into actual businesses, corporations? For example, Kevin Samuel's channel right now is just there, yet it has all the subscribers. So right, it feels running more of it as a corporation, etc. Especially we should be thinking about this when we get bigger. We should be able to continue these systems.
Okay, Kaiser, let me stop your question there, and then I'll just ask it. I'll ask it, and then I'll ask it in this way. MOT, are you saying, look, this thing cannot be codified, it cannot be standardized, there is no productivity that was ever possible? Because you know what you did when I asked you the goal of the space, and then you told me the inevitability of what it was going to be, which is dragged down to lowest common denominator. Are you saying that anything else is impossible? Is that what you're saying?
Well, the foolishness get the actual views here. That's what it is. We came here, and the guy that he brought up was a great example of showing just how unprincipled black men were. The moment they had an opportunity to complain about this woman on the big stage and make that be the message, everybody ran over there and that became the message. Then all of a sudden, the things that we were supposed to do, the being the productive piece, is stand away from. Now it all turned into, let's complain about this woman and still accept her at the end of the day once she gets quote unquote humbled by the guy with all the subscribers. And it's like, I'm okay with that, but at the end of the day, I'm laying down seeds. So that's way when these people come out of here and they try to be productive, you're going to be locked out. At the end of the day, you're going to be locked out of anywhere. They're going to ask you about these certain content creators. And if you say yes, or boom, you're not even going to be allowed in any corporation. At the end of the day, we have to be able to find a great way of being able to cut people out of the conversation. And I think this whole, oh, it's a business and it's a corporation. It's not a business and a corporation. Leveraging collective stupidity for an audience. We've already had this been done to us by Oprah Winfrey. And so now we took the business model of what Oprah Winfrey and what those people did. Now we're doing it to ourselves. I don't care if people are making money out of it. At the end of the day, where did we really just want our voice just to complain about women, or did we want to actually fix our issues? I know people want to use money as an actual stopgap to be able to stop complaints from going forward, but I had my stuff together before I came to the Manosphere. My goal in the Manosphere was to help people be where I'm at. You cannot recreate a Cambia Samuels. You cannot recreate that moonshot. You can't recreate it. No matter how much you leverage it, you can't recreate that. And he didn't go anywhere or do anything. Who cares if he showed up in media? We still have the same problem and properly more gamed up women who know now that men are going to be able to be there no matter what they do. I think it's all a waste of time at this point. But at this point, the only thing you can do is be able to do your part. If people don't want to take sides, they don't want to work for things, make sure that these people don't come back after you've built everything and try to act like they were down the entire time. It happened after the civil rights movement. They did not stop people from actually coming up and trying to take advantage and credit of things that they wasn't a part of. And that's where we're at now. What we need is a laws change. None of these people have political sides taken. People actually made it look like taking a political side is stopping the money from flowing in. They came here to keep the conversation going about nonsense. And this is a 50-year-old conversation, by the way. This is not a new conversation. So that's where I'm at with it.
So Dr. Thunder, okay, MOT mentioned one thing there, which is laws changed. That was, that presumably is a tangible thing. But if you go back, and we want you to comment before we get to the goal, the good goal, laws change, for example. Right? If you go back, there is the notion of this cannot be organized because it always gets captured by YouTube algorithm, lowest common denominator. Everyone has said things relating to that, right? Starting with Mike V. So talk about that aspect, the aspect of, hey, substance cannot come out of this, or it's really hard for substance to come out of this. And then talk also about, well, what are these goals, such as the laws changed? What would it look like if you were to bridge the gap between YouTube algorithm versus change laws? That's a whole lot there. Go ahead.
So that's an age-old issue, and that issue was not going to be solved in an online community, and that is the sort of popularity versus substance issue. The especially in the United States, if you look at music, right? If you look at how the record companies have mastered taking the lowest common denominator and mass producing it and getting as much out of it as possible, and everybody knows what that is. But there is a much smaller community of folks that listen to jazz or classical music or the quote unquote high arts, as it were. Now, I'd argue that years ago, significant aspects of pop music was actually a much higher standard. So Motown, for instance, which was popular music, if you took Motown and you put it side by side to, I don't know, some Cardi B or something, you'd notice that one takes a much higher degree of sophistication in order to unpack, and the general population was able to do that. Now the general population is not able to unpack the nuance in Motown. Now we recognize the music. The music is already in the ether. But if that music came out now, it would not be as popular as it was when it came out. So this is a common issue that we have. I think it is a little bit unfair to expect that an online community, which is of Americans, would tend to operate any differently. You're going to have stuff that's going to tend to be salacious and whatever, and that stuff is going to run the most folks are going to be talking about that, and you're always going to have only a minority of folks that are on productivity. And I can look at the analytics on my own channel. If I bring up something, what I try to do, by the way, is I try to take topics that have some edge, have some potential to catch the algorithm, but then I end up spinning it into talking about the stuff that I think is important anyway. Right. I use the sort of headline stuff, the lowest common denominator stuff, but then I spin it into a loftier conversation where we can address, well, this is why this doesn't work, and this is an opportunity to learn X, Y, and Z.
Bait and switch.
Yeah. So that tends to be the strategy. And I think a number of folks, they use that strategy. We know that a certain kind of topic is going to get clicks. Let me take that out as an opportunity to find a way to connect this to a topic that I really want to discuss. So there's a number of folks that do that. There's also a bunch of folks that are just straight opportunists, and they're just basically taking advantage of people. And it's a grift and everything else. I mean, but I don't know that I'd argue that stuff is necessarily a higher percentage in the space than it is other places. I just think that it's perhaps more obvious.
Okay, I like that you mentioned that. Okay, because you mentioned critical mass before, or people talk about the 80-20 rule, and the 80-20 rule turtles all the way down in the sense that if it's a critical mass question, obviously still here too, there will be at best 10% substance, right?
Yeah.
Even, if we're going with the 90-10 rule now, it'll be at best 10% substance. So Mike V, okay, you came at this, started with an operational kind of mindset, right? So let's say it's 5% substance. Okay, let's say we were to accept that because, hey, after all, you don't expect the majority of any particular thing to thrive. Kaizo started vaguely mentioning something about, but I met somebody. Like he talked about meeting me online, and then we do stuff offline. Like we do business, right? But forget that aspect, which is anecdotal and also not to the goal of the space ultimately. But how do you take that 5% and maybe build that curtain, that wall that you were talking about of separation? How do you take that 5% and make something actionable, operational out of it? Is that even possible? What would that look like with the end goal of maybe changing some laws? Maybe you don't have to go back that far with the law stuff, but do you agree with the 5%? Are they there? Can they be harnessed? What would that harnessing look like, Mike V?
Yeah, I definitely think that that 5 to 10% or 5%, as you mentioned, can be leveraged for other tangible goals. And in the Manosphere, I think the rough estimate of subscribership is anywhere between 40 to 45,000 subscribers that you're going to get. If you're saying that you're going to get 5%, and you're talking about anything less than 5,000 or even 3,000 for that matter, then you're talking about a very small audience that does pay attention. They're of a certain demographic. They're looking for something specific, and at that point, you need to deliver up on that demographics demands or their needs or their interests. And I think what happens, in this space, you don't really have enough content creators who focus on the substance aspect. For example, we started the Brain Trust for that very reason. We wanted to separate ourselves from other channels, from other content creators who were not about substance. We wanted to be a center of excellence in a think tank within the space itself. And so if you wanted something tangible, you can actually come here and get it. If you wanted non-tangible things, you can go to other channels and get that and sit on panels for 8 hours and not get anything out of it. And so I don't know if you know, I don't know if the space can survive off of the 5%, but I do know that if you had to translate that into protein, the average human being can't survive off of 5 grams of protein a day. You need at least 60 grams as an adult.
Can I engage with him on that point, Ike?
Yeah, go ahead and engage with what he's saying. Again, with the goal being, how can you harness the 5%? What kind of the things that should be done? Dr. Thunder mentioned offline, for example, and you did mention offline because after all, that's where the rubber meets the road. Go ahead, engage.
Yeah, so I will definitely comment on that. But for example, the Black Brain Trust, I did actually meet that channel before I knew Mike V was part of it, actually. And then you also told me a little bit later. And okay, so someone asked me about my channel, right? If people know my channel, I do 2 things. I do high IQ stuff. I do high intellectual stuff. And I also do what people call, you know what it's called, Dr. Thunder, right? The other thing that many people like to watch.
Right. Nika-ish.
Exactly, the dust, right? So I do a mix of all those things. Now, what I've realized, you know, what I've seen from my sort of experiment is when I do the dust, I get good donations. I get $1,000 and all that kind of stuff. When I do the more high IQ stuff, I also get donations. So what I've realized is what I'm doing is I'm leveraging both. So I give people the dust until they get tired of the dust. Then the high IQ stuff, people watching, they can also get a little bit of the crumbs every so often. But I've sort of recognized that, you know, I've been doing a lot of psychological analysis on Black people in general. We don't like things when they're too serious. So maybe I'm trying to try a new thing, edutainment, whereby it's entertaining enough, but it's still having enough substance, though I'm not wasting the bandwidth, right?
I'm sorry. Was there a question in there?
Yeah. So you engage. I don't know if you want to comment on that, Mike V, right? But there is something there about Black people and not wanting to be too serious.
I can't hear anything.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think that was MOT there.
Okay.
But there's something there, perhaps worth commenting on, that says, hey, you know, Black people, whether they be Africans or African Americans or whatever, don't want things too serious, right? And one could look at certain anecdotal things. Like I always notice from time to time that when I watch the things that I like to consume, generally speaking, intellectually, there's not a lot. Forget Manosphere, right? Mm-hmm. Just not a lot of Black faces doing that kind of stuff, right? And when they do it from a hip hop angle, you know. And it's like, dude, I just want to hear. Can I just get some market analysis without it having to be about community, you know? Because it's always watered down. Whenever there's a kind of that kind of a thing on it, it gets watered down. So, are there any comments on that aspect, Mike V, that perhaps matches your observations with regard to the 5%? That hey, people are just don't want stuff serious, like the Black Brain Trust, for example.
Well, it's the height of achievement of the base itself. I mean, if you have people who have not really achieved much in life, then you're not going to get a whole lot of productivity out of them or any interest out of them either. And so I think that's where the space is right now. But there is room to actually improve a lot of that. I think if we start doing more collaborations on more content on productivity, I think you start to squeeze out a lot of the nonsensical and non-tangible content that's being percolated in the space. In terms of how to make it, how to make it actionable, you're definitely going to have to engage offline. There are ways to really engage certain elected officials, non-elected officials, strategists and things of that nature to really get some traction on some things going. We do know that there are different. If you go outside of the manosphere, you'll definitely see that there is more traction outside of it than there is within it. But I do think that, we just need to actually collaborate more on more content that is about productivity than it is not.
Okay, so let me ask you this, LAR.
Can I say something?
Go ahead.
So the I agree that is that's ideal. You know, I'm an academic,
Mhm.
okay, and even amongst students that go to college, they're paying tuition to learn. You still have to play the same game, and that is as Kaizo was saying, you can't be too serious. And this is not just with black people. This is sort of spread to this is the general disposition of most folks. Okay, you can't be too um, uh, abstract, intellectual, um, philosophical. You know, you can't do that too much because, I mean, it's easy to do it too much. A little bit of it is a lot. You still have to soft pedal. You still have to 90% of it is this really oversimplified, you know, and these are people that are coming to school paying tuition to learn, and you still have the same dynamic. So I don't know that in I struggle with this all the time.
Mhm.
I struggle with this all the time. In even in the art that I create. There's the art that I do with artists that are big name artists, and the stuff is super simple, not a big deal. It's not super engaging. And then there's the stuff that I do where it's super challenging. It's a great experience, especially for the musicians, for the artists, right? But there's hardly anybody there in the audience because there's not that many people that can, you know, can get with that.
So
So
let me.
I don't know. I just
Yeah,
go
I
ahead.
like that. It's, okay, cool. The thing is, here's the thing. I mentioned the 80-20 rule goes all the way down to and all that kind of stuff. And I do. I'm a man that recognizes hierarchy in the sense that there's always it's only going to be a small percentage. I know LAR doesn't like this because LAR is our egalitarian over here, but it's only a small percentage of people who know what the hell they're doing, who can walk and chew gum at the same time, whom are not sucking at life. And then even a tinier percentage as you go up with regards to making real change in real life, making real things happen, right? Only a small percentage of people, reach any particular height of career. Only a small percentage of people start businesses. Only a small percentage of people make change or become political entrepreneurs, right? And go out there and do things. So I will accept that 100%, right? But still, the world has been happening and people and different communities have been getting their things done using this small percentage of people, right? Unless we disagree that that's not how it's going on elsewhere. Then, okay, and let me ask MOT this, and then I'll get to you, LAR, about the change of the laws then. Because LOT, you brought up the whole, well, it's not going anywhere. This is what it's going to be. But it's like, okay, cool. Small percentage of people, these people have to still do the stuff. Well, how do other places do it? How do the Sikhs do it in their temple with the small percentage of people, right, whom are the leaders of the community, get things organized, right? How does that happen? Or is it the question that, hey, they have a culture and they have a this, and then there's no culture here? Is that what we're saying?
So the problem is that people lack the willpower to do it. They use the collective ignorance of the entire group to play into the ignorance of the entire group. They never set no standard down. They're here to make sure that this stuff goes on forever. You can start with yourself. It's not even about a group of people. How many people have really stepped off and actually do the things that need to be done? The answer is almost none of them. And it's like, listen, these people want to hang out and squat on places to destroy it. That's why they came here. That's why the collective people came here. Like, it's not even like they don't know this information. They was raised by the actual situations that these actual so-called relationship people trying to feed them back into. They was raised by these people. So at the end of the day, if you lack the willpower in order to create a decent product, in order to leave those people behind, then you're part of the problem. Just say that I'm part of the problem. I refuse to change. I don't have any self-esteem, that I'm just going to keep doing what's here. That's how we got where we are right now. The the over procreation of the Bravo Alpha November. Now we got the older Bravo Alpha Novembers trying to lead the younger Bravo Alpha Novembers back into the same situation. No one has set down a standard. The military, how you think they get special forces people? You think they just keep letting anybody who failed every test in? No, you got to have standards. We're having a conversation about standards with grown-ups in their 30s and 40s. This is the problem.
Hey, MOT, if I can just ask
Go
you.
ahead, sir.
So, I totally agree with that. I agree with what you're saying. It's a people need to, put up or shut up. Be part of the solution, not part of the problem. I totally agree with that.
But
here's the challenge, though. Here's the challenge. When you're just talking about special forces. By definition, special forces is an exclusive group, right? So that's the elite of the elite. And even within the military system, it's the elite of the elite. So what? So my point is,
everybody don't want to be elite.
Right. That's right. That's my point. Everybody doesn't want to be elite. That's
how do you create a wall around the open internet, around the open space like this? Because that has been the kind of the surrounding thing here, and Mike V brought it up, which is okay. You need to kind of make something, quarantine, have certain kind of, certain kind of people say certain things, and these are vetted elites. Since we've gotten to this point now, talking about the elite of the elite, right? And I think it within what you're raising there, Dr. Thunder, is how do you put a wall around, something where anybody can fire up a stream tomorrow, put the right tag in there, and gather the masses over there, right?
Right, and even people that are, and this is interesting because it's all algorithm driven. Because even people that will say, "Oh, I'm not part of the Manosphere. Oh, I'm not Red Pill. I'm not X, Y, and Z," but then you look at the hashtags in their videos. You look at the, and you look at the folks that are actually showing up to watch the videos, and it's a lot of the same usual suspects because of the topics. Or you look at the way that they design the thumbnails. The thumbnails are obviously designed to bring in a certain kind of person. And if it's purely based on a business, I'm just trying to, get the most
stagnate
views.
The group.
Right. I'm just trying to get the most views. I'm just trying to do X, Y, and Z. Then you don't care what the topics are. You're just there for the shenanigans or whatever.
Okay. Well, can I push back against that? Push back on the pushback.
Sure.
The thing is that you have to make a choice. In your actual career field that you're actually in, you had to do a lot of stuff to be there. You play multiple instruments. Did you not have to put the time in to play those multiple instruments? I think that stuff's hard, really hard. I cannot play instruments to save my life. But at the end of the day, in order for you to be able to get good enough to where you can present yourself in front of other individuals, you had to start with yourself. And you had to put yourself not only by learning, but you had to keep putting yourself in repeated situations and circumstances where you had to keep testing the metal of where you are. You didn't just say, I'm going to give up. I'm going to do whatever it is because it's easy. Yes, turn on the live stream and just following the news cycle is easy. It's too easy. But at the end of the day, most of these people don't have their stuff together. They see illicit money being made as awesome and fantastic. I think it's unacceptable. But at the end of the day, I don't have these people around me outside of the space. Like once I get done with this, it's back to the road. It's back to making the real money. But see, these people never had money. And they're not trying to get a natural career field. So just turning this stuff on and keeping up with the gender war is something that needs to stop. I don't care. I will go to my legislator and be like, look, we need to get this stuff out of here. Get them out of here. Let them go back to being poor, dumb, and broke and dealing with the same people. We don't need these failures becoming louder than they actually are. You became a failure because you didn't want a voice. You're not going to come here and mess up our space. You're going to go back to the actual dens of not being anything. So that's what we need to do. We didn't create the space to go in there. Go ahead.
Yeah, and to the extent that folks are actually sort of operating the way that you just described, I'd have an issue with them also. I think part of the challenge is you and I may define that differently. We may look at the list of content creators and see what it is that they do differently, which is fine. which is fine. But I agree with the way that you just described that. I don't have an issue with that.
Yeah, but you are arguing against what I just said by making it look like you didn't understand what I just said, but then you just came back behind what I said as if you didn't understand the actual topic that I presented. What I said was it's a choice. Like you played all those instruments, you had to put yourself in a position to do that. So if you understand that, then you understand setting the actual standards and putting the time in so that way you can be able to be better at something rather than just sitting in the corner in your place with a green screen talking about relationship garbage all day. I mean, that's a choice too. I mean, all these things are choices.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't, I don't think I pretended like I didn't understand you. I think I understood you.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. No problem.
LAR, you want to get some laws changed? Okay. How does, because how does that happen? Okay, so we know about affirmative action going to the Supreme Court, being brought about, for Asian Americans, blah blah blah. We know about, for example, that legal route, going to different appellate systems and then moving the whole thing up that way. We know about local politics, where it's actually most important, and all these other kinds of things. We know about being a political entrepreneur, where you're like, hey, I'm gonna go do this stuff. Okay, I'm gonna get my itch together, get the money together, put a crew together, and I'm gonna start running for stuff and moving on in that direction. So we're talking about mainstreaming, being out there and saying things, and maybe somebody gets a contract, maybe somebody becomes a Rush Limbaugh. But it does. How do you change those laws? Because the Rush Limbaugh thing, it may seem like it's what's changing the laws, but it may just be a complete total non sequitur or a reflection about of some real power going on. You want to change some laws, LAR? It's got to be done outside of this space. This is a free, open question now. Not so much about what's possible, but what you could envision. It's like, hey, if you had the perfect way tomorrow, like, hey, boom, wake up tomorrow, the Manosphere is going to change the laws. How does that happen, LAR?
That military statement, minds and hearts, is pretty much how everybody does it. You change people's minds, their hearts change, and then everybody can get on the same page and agree to go in a certain direction. That's the thing about the pushback a lot of times.
But the truth is, it's snipers and tanks. That's what.
But
and then you paint it. You say minds and hearts. That's your PR. The truth is something.
I'm talking about politics in the country, not outside, not foreign policy.
But you're correct as well. But if I just kind of, I would still say that, especially if you're a man, right? Minds and hearts, and I'm not saying there's no minds and heart, there's no PR, there's none of that to the way in which a man typically and historically gets political power. But it is way easier for a woman to do minds and hearts because they'll have a whole trope called damsel in distress, for example. They have a whole way of just turning everything into some kind of a moralizing when it has nothing to do with moral at all. Like all of a sudden people would just be like, yeah, let's give her what she wants. Okay. Now, I know that that's a flimsy example, but what I'm saying is that a man's world typically is a little bit on the other side of the minds and heart things, where if he doesn't come out with that big stick, all the game and the soft talking, shout out to Roosevelt, doesn't work, right? So go ahead. I just wanted to say that you may or may not react to it, but continue.
No. I think we have a softer society, and and thinking about media plus social media, you've seen people go down some extreme paths in a 6-month period because they watched something or listened to something for long enough or Googled something for long enough, and they just say that this is where I'm going. And so forcing people, I get it, but this is a weird country, man. Like, everybody wants to be free and everybody wants you to do what they say at the same time. And it creates a odd space where either you're going to get something done or you're just going to be stagnated because people just want a buck just because. So now to me, like over the last maybe 10, 12 years, ideal sense is you get the people's quote unquote hearts and minds, you ride that wave, and then you pounce on whatever policy you can at that particular time. And then guess what? There's going to be a counter to that. There's going to be a counter wave, and then they pounce on that. It's the same political back and forth that's been going on, since the quicker since the advent of social media. So, can you get the laws changed? Yeah. You changed the same thing you talked about, Rush Limbaugh. What were they doing? They were the left had propaganda that worked, the right had propaganda that worked. The right went to the talk radio route, the left went Rolling Stone magazine and that type of direction. So the question that what I would say is, I don't think it looks like we're competent enough to pounce on a good thing to move forward. So, that's always can we actually pull it off, and can we pounce on that good moment? And because of all the shenanigans, I would say right now, no.
Okay. Shout out to the RCS. Who is that? Well, it's an Android user for sure, regardless, because they got the $10 super chat. You got a little sound effect, got a little celebratory thing for our friend. Shout out to Solo TV 84, one of the originals. I had to give him a shout out for the Dom DeMarco there. But and competence, by the way, is a technical term, and that tends to.
What happened to the crypto gang?
Wow, talking smack. Well, I'm still dollar cost averaging, and that. Anyways, let's not. Web3. I'm coming for you guys, and give me 2 more years. Anyways, if we're talking about competence, which LAR uses there as a technical term, some people get triggered by it. But competence is, do you have scientific competence or you don't have scientific competence? Like, does the engine work? Does it not work? People take it personally, for example, and you may just not have competence with regards to getting certain kinds of goals met. I'm going to ask Kaizo and then Dr. Thunder, and we'll go to Mike V and MOT again, because you're the one that brought up the whole black people thing, and then we went down the rabbit hole of people not really wanting things to be too serious. And then we're still talking, okay, fine. Still, people, the small, the few, find a way of getting things done. Okay, find a way of getting their goals met in our individual lives. For example, as Dr. Thunder was using an example recently, you found a way to get things done. You found a way to get goals met. Okay, Kaizo, if we go back to abstractions, how does this competence gap get, shall we say, filled? And you can use you can bring up examples of other communities and what have you with regards to how they're few, because nobody has some kind of like, oh, over here is where all the geniuses are. It's like, no, everybody has their low lives. In a recent podcast, recent Case Closed, we did talk about the fact that perhaps other groups have a way of keeping their low lives out of sight, out of the conversation, and just more hierarchical. Perhaps black people are a little too egalitarian. I don't know. I'm saying many things now, but you get the question. Go ahead, abstract from there.
Yeah, so actually, this is something that we had on my channel as well, right? So if you notice, my channel is not necessarily the whole women thing. We don't talk about women in my channel unless we're clowning men for talking about women. But what we tend to do is talk about geopolitics, money, finance, and that stuff. And one thing I notice is there's a lot of low, I don't want to say low vibration. I was going to say low IQ, but anyways, there's a lot of people that come in with the stereotypical, the white man is controlling the so-called African governments and black people will never be free. I'm like, duh, yeah, that's what he should be doing for his own people, right? So I don't allow that stuff to happen in my channel at all. If any dusty comes in telling the obvious, somehow they're exposing the truth about how the matrix functions, I'm like, yeah, that's what he should be doing, and we should be doing something else. Anyway, so I'll answer your question more directly. Other communities do the same thing. They don't allow dustness. And when I say dustness, I'm not talking about the way I run my channel. My channel is dusty. I'm talking about the lack of a masculine figure that rules and leads. I've said this before in the Manosphere before they kicked me out before. You remember? I said, black community needs to overtake the churches. The Protestant churches have become basically a woman thing. Women are now pastors and priests and prophetesses. There's no such thing. Right? You people, right, have allowed women to rule over you. Other communities, right, I'm a Muslim right now. Shout out to Muhammad, peace be upon him. As a Muslim right now, we don't allow that stuff to happen.
This cat.
Us men
You
are
said
in
right now, the Muslim right now. You gonna change next week?
well, you know, I'm not gonna go into that, but the point is, the point is, right? As black men, we do need to have a standing of power. The Sikhs, the men are in control of the Gurdwaras. The Muslims, the men are in control of the masjids, right? The Yahoo boys, the Yahudim, right? They are in charge of the synagogues. Everybody, the men are usually leading this. The issue with us, I remember I went to a certain YouTuber, I'm not going to mention his name, and I said, listen, men got stop this whole thing of putting women and holding women responsible. Listen, a woman is going to be a woman. She's going to act as much as the system allows her to act. Us men, we have to be the one leading the thing. Women have to follow it. And if they don't want to follow it, look, we find other women. We shouldn't even be having a discussion with them. That's the point. The other men in the other societies, even in the West, are still thriving. The Indians are thriving, right? The Lebanese are thriving. These people are thriving because the men are still in control. They don't have discussions with their women as if they're gonna come to some holistic understanding and like, what?
So, Mike V, and then Dr. Thunder, is this something that, how could this happen? Okay, look, and I believe in Dr. Thunder, I did mention in your channel one time, I left a comment, right? And then we had a conversation about it later, which is like, okay, men need to lead, men need to do X, Y, Z. And then we look at certain stats and it's like, okay, cool. Anecdotally, black men were not in my engineering class, not in undergrad, nor in the masters. And then I look around like, oh, Amazon data centers, people are building all this stuff. All this money is flowing. Why are there no black men? And then I remember they weren't in the classes. They weren't over there. So it's like, this has to be, because again, things have to happen in real life, real ground, right? And that money has to actually be made. Okay, they're not just going to give you, Amazon's not just going to give you money unless you have some expertise to bring with regards to building their data centers, right? So that has to be part of the goals, like, okay, changing laws and certain other things, but also where is the level of competence, LAR, and then Mr. Mike V mentioned earlier in terms of the base level of the masses, okay? Raising that up, is that a necessary step to take, right? In the direction, Mr. Mike V first, raising
Here,
that
one
base.
second. 1 second, real quick. Did you get the message about Game Changer wants to come up? So just
you got the email.
yeah, but maybe just drop the link in the chat. Go ahead, Mike V.
Oh, he is in the. Gotcha. Okay, yeah, go ahead, Mike V.
If MOT, you might need to mute up. If you could repeat the last part of the question again.
Okay, cool. So basically, the idea is you brought in earlier the base of the masses, like the level of the mass, the base of the lowest common denominator. Okay, and then I'm like, okay, this makes sense. Number one, not forget the whole thing of cutting down your lower people, right? Which everyone else outside the West tends to be able to do better, and perhaps the ADOS community in the West is perhaps the most egalitarian, right? In other words, finding it difficult to be like, hey, we don't deal with all those other blacks over there, right? That kind of a thing, right? So raising up the level, whether it be education or money or whatever, increasing the level of that population such that you have more of X, Y, and Z people to work with, and then you can go take over the churches or whatever it is that Kaiser wants to do. I hope I've not made it more, even more unclear.
Well, the first thing you're going to have to do is increase the literacy of the people first. I mean, you're an African, you know Thomas Sankara, in Upper Volta, which is now Burkina Faso. In 1984, when he took over, he increased the literacy rate of the people by 2/3 by 1987, by the time he died. We know that Maurice Bishop in Grenada increased the literacy rate of his people in the early 80s, almost twofold, and brought water to the people when they needed it, which is why the United States overthrew both of them. Same thing with Patrice Lumumba. And so we know that Black men have done this in the 20th century, in the latter half of the 20th century. It's just a matter of, in this space, we have not really come up with a framework of how we engage the audience in order to grow and accelerate that base. What we try to do, at least what I have done on the Black Brain Trust, is try to hold tech talks every Saturday to increase the Black male population in the tech space. We have taken people who have been cooks and dishwashers at fast food restaurants and have gotten them help desk jobs, gotten them into IT, accelerated them up into the network engineer aspect, programming roles, things of that nature. And it's only one Saturday, a week that we were doing this. So we know that we can do this, but it's just there's no willpower, there's no political will. In Manosphere 1.0, we had MRAs, men's rights activists. No one tried to step on their toes. Everybody know that those guys were the SMEs. They're subject matter experts in what they're doing. And so when it was time to get the laws changed, you let those guys do the talking. But you fund their operation, you get behind them in any way that you possibly could in order to move the needle on things that needed to be, for goals that need to be achieved.
So what you're saying, from what I'm understanding, is that first of all, the Manosphere is a little bit too decentralized. We don't actually have we don't have any sort of foundations. Like for example, like other groups, to some extent, right? As you mentioned about let's say the Africans who, Patrice Lumumba, etc. There was some kind of hierarchy. What I see happening in the Manosphere is decentralized people, and this is what MOT said earlier. Well, there is no corporation. So one of the issues, for example, you, brother, like I know a little bit of personality. You come across, again, just my opinion, as some kind of INTP type. Like, you're good at making models, you're good at making abstractions, and you're good at understanding the problems. But then also you need people like Game Changer with the FE, extroverted feeling, who knows what the community want, who can embody himself with the spirit of the community. And people like you two have to be working together. He can more or less sort of get acclimated with the spirit of the times, and while you again help him and you help each other to sort of create that framework. So I guess I agree with you.
Yeah,
there is a lack.
You can go back to post-slavery. After the Civil War was over, Black people's literacy rates were 1%. By 1900, by the 20th century, it was well over 90%. And so we know that things can be done, but it's just all of the disaggregation that's in the space is on purpose, because there are people in here who are here to purposely sabotage any sort of progress from the majority of the people.
I know I got here late, right? But I want to know something, because I might have missed something. Has it been brought up that a part of the issue is we have groups of people who are fighting losing battles on purpose to stall? Because like when you brought up the MRAs, actually the MGTOWs and the PO with the pickup artists, they had an issue with those guys. They were fighting against those guys during that time period because they didn't want them to go as far as they wanted to go. Like in this space, I get it. You have people, the relationship topic is what everybody gravitates to. And but there are so many different niche markets and genres of people that do other things that they don't get enough shine. But ironically, a lot of times people spend more time arguing with the people that they don't like than they do actually continuously building.
I think you can do both, LAR. I think you can do both. I think you can walk and chew bubblegum at the same time. I think you can deconstruct the illegitimate talking points of those other people that we don't like, and you can also build at the same time that you're flying.
I don't see why.
I don't think people are deconstructing anything. I think people are playing and slop with the people that they call pigs because they're having a good time.
Okay, I want to bring Game Changer in. Go ahead, Dr. Thunder.
Yeah. So I think this is interesting. So a couple of points I want to make. So if you follow the analogy, so you had not long ago you had record companies that were totally controlling the market, the music market. They were controlling what could be distributed, which artists would be introduced to the general public. They were totally controlling that. Now, good, bad, or indifferent, what it created was a certain quality level of the artist. Okay, so you had a certain thing. You weren't going to just have anybody get in there, but they were going to have a way to vet this artist to see if it's a viable person, to represent the record company, to make a bunch of money, whatever. But then what started happening is that started to get decentralized. So now you have, almost every artist has the capability of recording a studio quality recording in their basement because of the advancement of technology. But then also on top of that, an unending, free range of ways to distribute for free. You could just put your stuff on YouTube. You could put your stuff on social media. You could put your stuff on, X, Y, and Z on SoundCloud. There's all these free ways to distribute the stuff. Now, what happened because of that is two things. I would argue that there's more of everything in general. I'd argue that there's a lot more bogus stuff. But I'd also argue that there's a great deal more of that sort of underground, high quality level stuff that is never going to really be popular. But if that stuff didn't exist, the underground actually supports the popular arts. If it wasn't for the underground sort of is the underpinning. And so if the analogy follows, early on in the sort of online communities, you had a much more controlled population of folks, and with particular principles. But that thing has been sort of thrown wide open. And so now you have a lot more riffraff that's also sort of intermingled with the other stuff that's going on. But you still also, I think, have this whole this sort of underground, the sort of the high level folks that are in the space, and without that stuff, the space isn't what the space is. Though you have a bunch of garbage that's sort of gotten itself in there, so you just don't have the sort of restrictions, right? You don't have the sort of gatekeepers, as it were. This is only these guys are going to get in here. Only these guys are allowed to represent or use certain talking points. So
well, I think there is room for that. I think we can point out the people who share who share that type of content and call them out for what it is, that they're not manosphere.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
That's all.
Okay. Yeah. Now I want to Game Changer. You rolled in here. I'm assuming you have something to say. And one of the things that just comes to mind when all this stuff is said, especially when Mike V said the different types of people. Oh, I'm going to fund this person over here. He's the subject matter expert with regards to men's rights activism and the laws and the right path to go from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, all that kind of stuff. I'm going to stay out of that. I'm going to do my tech talk. I'm going to make money. I'm going to fund that. These people over there, they're going to form this particular think tank, blah, blah, blah. These kinds of things happen. Now, when all that is said, and then Kaiser chimed in as well, I just see opportunity in other words, entrepreneurialism. In other words, you go and you do something. And I'm thinking of anyways, it's an opportunity, right? Because it's not like it's impossible.
You got some money.
What?
You got some money.
Yeah. Shout out to the super chat. Okay, everything has to shut down when the pennies roll in. But anyways, thank you very much. I think that's a super sticker of some kind, isn't that right, Dr. Thunder?
Yeah. It's a man riding a rocket.
That's a big one. That looks like the $50 level, $49.99. That's an iPhone user out there. Thank you very much much appreciated. Okay, so I'll just end the note there on the whole entrepreneurialism thing. And that for me, I'm not saying that, oh, I'm recommending it or something like that, because that's kind of stupid. You don't recommend for somebody to do something. It's like, well, either you do it yourself or maybe you find the right person, and then you, especially when it's a go lift up that massive stone over there type stuff, which is what entrepreneurialism is about, right? But I do see it. I do see, hey, that thing can be done. Mr. Game Changer, you came in, you've heard the conversation so far. We've asked questions. The poll has given the answer, whereby people are saying mainly it's a sideshow, right? It's perhaps not necessary in a causal way to go mainstream, but it may just be an after effect as a result of you haven't gone mainstream. That are there things that can be done outside the PR department? I gave the example of, hey, Tesla has a PR department, but that's because it makes cars and then sells cars, and then you get a lawsuit, okay? But you can't just
Also,
not make a car, not sell a car, and all you have is PR. But hold on, Kaizo. Game Changer, what are your thoughts on this whole thing?
Okay, so I'll address the last question that you gave to Mike V, and then I definitely want to go to the broader topic of the mainstream and Manosphere and its relationship to that, definitely. So the question about Black men and literacy and things like that, and basically just the underachievements of Black men, I think that largely the problem that we have is very unique to us, and it's a quagmire that I don't know. Perhaps more intelligent brothers could help me figure out how we should collectively deal with this, and that is we're unique in a sense that our strength is that we can do anything, and our weakness is that we can do anything. I think that is a very, very interesting position to be in. It's actually working against us in a lot of ways, because we seem to excel in each and every single area that a young man would want to be when they grow up. For example, if you ask a young man, what do you want to be when you grow up? He'll say an athlete, an entertainer, the champion of the world, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We seem to excel in those things, but for every one of those, there's a group of failures. However, we're distracted by our ability to do that. I do notice, and I noticed this growing up in Oakland, where we have a large Asian population, is that they're not distracted by such things. I know I wasn't, and I became an engineer because I don't have any talents athletically speaking and things like that. So I pretty much listen, I got to do this. I don't have a backup. I don't have hoop dreams. I don't have NFL dreams. And I don't have rap dreams. This is my lane, because this is all I got. Asian kids are kind of born into that world. Asian young men are born into that world. They don't have delusions of being Michael Jordan. They didn't, so they did focus on that. They don't have and it's unfortunate that we live in a country. Well, I shouldn't say unfortunate, but it is very distracting that we have people who are highly successful outside of traditional means in this country. That's the norm. That's not an outlier situation. Ike being Nigerian, I don't know if it's different than other West African countries that I heard of, but I'm pretty sure it's very similar to where if you don't perform academically, chances are you do not eat. You do not, and I'm speaking figuratively, of course, but you will not excel. You will be reduced to poverty if you do not perform academically speaking. That's not the case here. A person can be a complete imbecile and become successful. There's a Jeremy Meeks, he's probably not the brightest person alive, but he actually became wealthy and famous for breaking into somebody's house, only in America. So I do think that we have all of these distractions, which takes us away from conventional ways of making money, where other communities, they don't have those particular type of distractions, so they actually know that they have to work and or study in order to become wealthy.
That word there, distraction, is the mainstream. Another example of sizzle, no steak, symbolism. Oh, here, look, we're talking on. Meanwhile, you don't have the material. There's no stick for that whole big stick versus propaganda dichotomy. What answer that?
Okay, you're talking about as it applies to the manosphere.
As applies to the manosphere, yes, and its stated goals, right, which are material in nature, and most of which are causally also material, or at least to the degree to which it's abstract, it's in the law, right, that kind of a thing, right, where but you still have to materially change the law. Whether it's a democracy, you still got to push people. And we started out with the democracy talking about, oh, it's good to get into the zeitgeist. Yeah, the zeitgeist is one thing, but zeitgeist, you still got to get people to the polls to change said laws, that kind of a thing. But anyways, go ahead and comment.
No, exactly. I mean, whenever first of all, you have to galvanize the population in order to, make any definite change. And I did a video on this not too long ago, but Barack Obama came out with My Brother's Keeper initiative, which was focused on, it was a change in policy to benefit Black men and boys. And it was the Black men of the time, a large portion of Black men, professional Black men at that, who signed it down. And that's because the mindset of the time was that they don't want to make any significant changes to the Black community that doesn't also benefit Black women. Now, at the same time, Black women are willing to, because they look at it themselves as in competition with Black men, they look at it as, okay, what's mine's is mine's and what's theirs is ours. And that's how any program that benefits Black people is viewed. There are programs that benefit Black girls, but any program that benefits Black boys must also benefit Black girls. So I don't think that the men of the time were aware of this. So it is very important that to get the mindset of the men and women on track in order for when the opportunity to make changes that do benefit Black men presents itself, there isn't any detractions and there isn't any distractions. Right now, our mindset collectively is not right.
Okay. And when I hear the mindset thing, because one thing I haven't talked about is timeline. And timeline, when you say mindset, timeline is the timeline gets long. In other words, it's like, okay, not for perhaps this crop of people, but for maybe some of this crop of people to hear so that they may train the younger people in the right way so that 25 years down the line, right? Because that doesn't change the law tomorrow. It's like more mindset is like a long, it's not a worthy goal, but the timeline is on a different scale, right? You're talking about generation, right?
Absolutely. You see, here's the thing, and I know it in this space, and in others, people talk about the mindset of Black women, but that didn't happen overnight, and their control of the media and things like that. You got to think like things like Color Purple. Their eyes were watching God. What is it? Black women. Well, for colored women, things like that. These were all books and things well before they became movies. These were small people, Zora Neale Hurston. These were small influence that they had to the minds of the psyches of Black women, and here we are, almost a century later in some cases, to where you see the seeds that they planted bear fruit. We as Black men, we really struggle with delayed gratification, and we have to work on that. I mean, the Greeks have a saying that society functions or community functions if when old men plant trees whose shade they'll never appreciate. And I think that we need to develop that mindset. We're doing this for a better future for our sons.
Hey, let's acknowledge the super chats. Let's acknowledge our super chats.
I'm gonna go all the way back to the dusty freaking Jerry Springer over here.
Jareer Springer.
Jareer Springer. By the way, Jareer, just to put you guys up on, Jareer is nappy hair but it's the Somalis. Some of the Somalis that have the straighter hair, that's what they call the nappy-headed hose over there, Jareer. So, Jareer Springer, thank you very much for that. Okay, talking about yes, we'll take that to heart and father the children of unwed single mothers. And Mr. Kyodor again added another 20 to his previous 50. That's $70. Thank you very much. Says discipline equals freedom. Yes. Shout out. Also sounds like a Stoic Greek type saying. And then Jareer Springer again coming through. Okay, so MOT, I want to ask you, what the real what to the degree to which, I mean, you don't think this whole thing is hopeless, right? Otherwise, you would not be here. You maybe have defined a different set of goals, maybe that are more individual, and that you kind of scaled down perhaps what your hope may be. So, what are your actual reasonable goals? You don't have to tie it even to the sphere, but with regards to the kinds of things that the sphere should be aiming towards, you mentioned laws and such. What are your reasonable goals, and what is the timeline, if that's a question you can answer?
Sure. My reasonable goal is to stop talking about women, get your stuff together financially, and find a different group of women that are cultured to deal with productive men. That timeline, as soon as you get your stuff together, stop fighting the gender war, stop showing up to the gender war. You have to starve out the gender war profiteers who is keeping this conversation going. It's really not that difficult. I mean, the results are immediate. The results are immediate. Once you turn this stuff off and focus on yourself, the results are immediate. Just so long as you haven't had any kids, just don't have any more. Just build yourself a newer foundation. The results are immediate.
Okay, so find a different culture, or start a different.
Yes.
Just leave your father's house, go to the land of that I will show you, and all those other kinds of things. Start anew, start
Correct.
fresh.
Correct.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Now I want to ask.
And Moses has to die first, though.
Now, Dr. Thunder, what are your thoughts about that? There are two kind of timelines that we're given here. Mr. Game Changer talked about changing mindsets, and I immediately say, okay, cool. That's a time-long thing. Okay. MOT talk about the immediate. You individual right now, cut this stuff off. Stop talking about stuff you don't want. Okay, and go get stuff that you do want. Hashtag passport, right? Or and that kind of thing. Now, would you mind commenting on that if you want to? This range here. One perhaps suggests that there is a community down the line that you may be generationally projecting into, and perhaps the other suggests that no, there isn't. I'm putting words in your mouth, but go ahead.
Well, I mean, I got more involved in the space because it's really the only space where the kinds of conversations with the sort of regularity, intensity occur. And many of the conversations that are had, I think, are of critical importance. And if any of these sort of social dynamics that adversely affect Black men can be improved, and of course, everything always starts with a conversation. You have to get your ideas, worked out. You talk it through. You figure out what it is that you're going to do, and then you try to get a number of other folks to buy into the same sort of ideology. Conversations are good for that, and especially public conversations. I have a 9-year-old son, and if things can be improved at all, I'd like to see that happen. And perhaps it's pie in the sky to believe that just based on having some conversations on tough topics, and perhaps
God already sent a prophet. This might be blasphemy. Sent a prophet to your son by the way of a Ethiopian grocery worker.
That's right. That's right.
That your son has to marry an Ethiopian.
Yeah, but to Kaizo's point, it would be a prophetess though. So then we'd have to.
Yeah, that's
we'd
not
have
good.
to say, I don't know.
She needs to be chastised.
But anyhow, yeah, that's right. That's right. But my point is that, and it's not just about who he's going to have access to start a family, and then to start to collaborate with that person to work towards a legacy. It's not just that. That's of course the most central, most important thing, because if you don't do that, you don't reproduce, then you don't have a society. So obviously it's not a non-issue. There is a reason why relationship topics tend to dominate. It's because it's at the center of everything. And for some folks, it's at the center perhaps for the wrong reasons. For other folks that are sort of interested in the sort of conversation, the discourse associated with gender dynamics and and everything, then that perhaps is for a different reason. A lot of that stuff sort of gets thrown together, and then I think when being criticized, all of the stuff is still in the bucket. That's, and it's all sort of all the same stuff. I don't know that people, just because they're talking about relationships, are necessarily doing it for the same reasons. They may have some different reasons for that. And into this sort of SBE conversation, this shame, blame, explain, which also I think gets sort of thrown into the mix and suggested that that's all any of that conversation ever is. That definition I have an issue with, because then preaching a sermon would be SBE, or any sort of critical assessment would be then therefore SBE. And yeah. So anyhow, I don't know that I've really
like what you
directly
did
answered
there.
the question.
No, but it's good there. I'm going to name two dichotomies that you mentioned, and then we'll kind of start wrapping it up with this kind of last question here. But one of the two dichotomies that you mentioned is, for example, way before I came into this space, there's this book by Harvey Mansfield called Manliness. I've always been a philosophical type of person. I've always been into the ideas and such. And one of the main ideas is, how these different communities organize themselves with regards to the man and the woman kind of thing, the relationship, the family, and the standards, polygamy, monogamy, this, that, the other. How much nature is in there? How much is it just a question of maybe you had the peel, now you don't have the peel, all those other kinds of things. So there's that conversation, and then there is the conversation whereby you get stuck there and you're doing some trauma bonding, perhaps, right? Which is a different kind of thing. And then you talked about the fact that, hey, the SBE, the SBE thing is a symptom of the fact that there is no other arms, no other wings. In other words, you can have somebody preaching, for example. You're like, oh, the preacher is preaching, as long as the bricklayers are laying bricks, XYZ, right? But if everybody is a wannabe preacher, and there is no, in other words, again, back to it's a whole PR campaign without cars to sell, then you're like, then it starts to beg the question, right? So I think it's a symptom of some of the issues with regards to practical stuff. However, I want to start with Game Changer, and I want you to kind of wrap up your thoughts, but also kind of answer this question. It's something that I brought up in the last conversation when we were talking about men and women, or men bringing their issues to the fore. I alluded to the problem when I talked about damsel in distress, in the sense that I firmly believe, okay, and this is also something where it's not a 100% thing on. This is my position, right? On the spectrum, I'm on the side of men. It is almost inappropriate for men to get into too much of the political solutions, right? By political solutions, I mean, to be caricatured, damsel in distress solutions. Come feel my pain. Come tell me what to do. Okay, for example, I want reparations, but rather than either force you to give me reparations or negotiate with you to give me the reparations, I'm going to make you, I'm going to moralize to you about why you should give it to me. Will not work. As long as you may wish that it worked, okay? You may want, therefore, justice to actually, the day of judgment, yes, it will, you'll get your comeuppance. But we know that it will not work in the world of men, right? So what am I asking, Game Changer? I'm saying men, okay, I'm making a statement, and then you do the true or false, and then you kind of give your closing thoughts. In the arena of getting attention, right, which is this whole arena of, I'm going to moralize to you for you to feel my pain so you can change stuff. I'm going to be a damsel in distress or whatever. In the arena of getting attention, men will always lose, if you will, within a co-ed space. They're going to lose to women, or they're going to lose to BAN type stuff. In other words, the weirder, softer, more kumbaya stuff is always going to win out. And the man, whatever, who cares what you're saying? You haven't forced me to do anything, so why should I do anything? So I'm gonna put one more point on this, and then I'm really ask the question, Game Changer. The reason I'm saying this is because for time immemorial, for different kinds of societies and such, there's always been this respect for division of labor between men and women, and it was never the case that men sit down amongst women and talk about, hey, we're gonna negotiate and talk about our stuff. This is a modernity thing with regards to our emphasis on egalitarian, equal openness, also the democratic type of prejudices that we have towards discourse. We have to do, everybody comes together. So I'm saying this because of the mainstreaming. The mainstreaming is taking men's ideas or men's particular ways of doing things or what they want, putting it into this kind of political place where we're going to talk, and there are women present there, and somehow we think that the message will come out clean, as opposed to just, if that makes sense, game changer. True or false, men are always going to lose that battle, and then give your final thoughts, and then we'll go Mike V, MOT, and so on and so forth. Game changer, if my question made sense.
Yeah. I do get what you're saying, and yes, in a co-ed space, gathering attention to a cause, women are more adept at that, and that's because men have a protective instinct towards women, and a stronger sexual desire towards them, depending on what they're getting attention for. So yeah, to make a long and short of it, yes, they will always get more attention. I just seen a news story earlier this morning about a 14-year-old boy who beat up a 9-year-old girl. And, I think he was arrested, and, it made the news, it made the shade room and everything. And the mother came out and said, yeah, he beat up her brother too a week ago. And there was no story. So apparent. So yeah, when something happens to women and things like that, they are good at gaining attention. Gaining attention is a woman's survival tactic. It always has been. That's why they can scream louder for help and attention if danger is afoot. So yeah, that's definitely going to be the case.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
And your closing thoughts, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So now to that, I think that it is prudent amongst men for men to use that to their advantage if and when they can. And that is, if women are adept at gaining attention to a cause, then you support the women who share that cause in order to, because they are able to gain the attention that you need. Like if you think about the phrase, and hippies used to say this, don't trust anybody over 30. But it was really people over 30 hiring people under 30 to tell them that. So they are indirectly trusting people over 30. That is how they were able to manipulate the society. That is how they were able to separate a child from their parents' influence and bring them to to society's influence, even though you had somebody over 30 hiring somebody under 30 to tell you not to trust anybody but them. So it's a very interesting dynamic. And I think that we as men, when we can, to our end goal, should be able to use that to our advantage. Now, as far as the manosphere, properly, I do wish that, okay, so we have people who are really of a warrior mindset, which makes it very difficult, which makes building a little difficult around that. You can't have a society just full of warriors. What do I mean by that? In order to building is something that generally doesn't have opposition or competition. So you take a retired soldier, samurai, or whatever, a retired warrior of any type, of any culture, and then you try to tell them to farm. They may still look for enemies where they don't exist. And that's what I noticed in this space. So you have a group of people who want to focus on building something, which means that they have become farmers now. They should not be at odds with anybody except those who interrupts their building process. However, these people find themselves at war with people who are not rightly in war with them. And I get it. It's the warrior's mindset. It's like, oh, you shouldn't be at war with this group of people. So I'm going to be at war with you because you're in war with this group of people. It's an interesting dynamic, but that's the warrior's code. Like that's what they're going to do. I don't, it's a bit of a distraction and a slight nuisance, but I do understand the mentality behind it. It is possible. In fact, it is better to build something, whether it's, intellectual property, whether you want to edify a large population of people to one cause versus another without attempting to destroy something else. For example, if I want to teach STEM or, mentor math, which I've done in the past, I didn't go to war with football. I didn't go out and say, something, football is a distraction. You watch too much football and this and this. You need to focus more on this calculus. I don't do that. I teach what I teach to those who are willing to learn it, and not try to eliminate other aspects of their life that might enrich them. So
very well played. Yeah, very nicely said. Very nicely said. There, game changer. Now, Mike V, your closing thoughts and a response to this notion here that PR without real power, material power, economic power, real shit, right? Is similar to the damsel in distress trope and never works for men. True or false on that? And your closing thoughts.
I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question one more time?
Without having real power, and PR without real power is a damsel in distress position and will never work for men. And your closing thoughts. True or false on that, and your closing thoughts?
I think that's true, and I think it's also true for both sides. I think that there has to be, again, there has to be some kind of framework put in place, some principles put in place in order to actually get some kind of power. The PR piece is only one portion, but the other side of it is what are the concrete ideals that are going to be manifested out of all of this. For an example, when it came to abortion, you had governors who put in anti-abortion legislation. Once it got put on the ballot in Kansas, that got overturned almost immediately. When we talk about decriminalization of marijuana, we know that the drug laws disproportionately impacted Black men throughout the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Once they decriminalized it, we saw that there was a second move to actually repair all the damage that it caused by giving dispensary licenses and first access to Black men almost exclusively here in Massachusetts, and more specifically here in Boston. And so we see this sort of framework being replicated across the United States now in different states and different cities. It was on the ballot in November for the midterms. Many states are starting to adopt legalization of marijuana, decriminalization of marijuana, and actually distribution of marijuana now, even though it's not federally legal. And so things can be done when you organize on the ground. But the talk has to happen in these sort of social spaces like this, like the Black Manosphere, with people who are actually interested in functionally productive.
Shout out to you. So MOT, your closing thoughts, and is PR without power basically trying to be the damsel in distress, and is that ever suitable or desirable for a man to be in that position?
No. So what we've seen in this space is whenever a person was put into a place where they were to challenge the actual people that there was challenged, this person did a 180 on their whole business process, and it was called a chess move. So I don't trust these people who put any type of level of restraint toward those people who don't want to work toward progress. You always become an impediment. You always become an impediment to something. And yes, we should go to war with these people. You have to. Because at the end of the day, their numbers are going to outdo yours, and they're going to take compromise over progress every single time, unless you do not give them a choice. But at the end of the day, if you're complaining about things that are going wrong in society, then you really just don't have your stuff together. There are things that you can do. There are things that you can be able to do. I mean, we watch every other community do it. We've seen the Latins do it, the Asians do it, the Arabs do it. The Sikhs do it. We've seen gay people do it, but somehow Black people don't think that they don't have to organize on both sides to do it. So no more of this middle of the road. No more of this. I'm on the right, but I'm not organizing anything. Pick a side, so that way we can be able to strategize and organize. But we're the only ones strategizing and organizing on the left, and the people in the middle and on the right are not doing anything. You're actually depending on the people on the left to actually do your whole actual progressive piece for you, which I don't think that's even fair to us, even though we do care about this community a hell of a lot more than the people who actually run the actual gender war topics and all this kind of conversation do. So what I'm saying is this: get involved. It's not hard. I mean, I live in Colorado. Obviously, my rules are going to be very different from someone from somewhere else. But there's something on the ballot for you to actually be a part of. No one has to beg you to be a part of democracy. It's your responsibility. Not only that your ancestors fought for, but I kind of fought for it. I guess you could say it. Well, when I went to the military, it's like, dude, listen, you want your voice to be heard, and silence is not the answer. It never has been, and it never will be. Thank you for having me on, man. I'm going to be on the Real Danish channel at 6 o'clock Eastern. So I want to thank you guys for your support, and you guys have a really nice day. Thank you for having me on.
All right. Thank you. Shout out to the Real Dana. Shout out to the Real Dana. Okay. Organize on both sides. Pick a side, organize on both sides. And you do emphasize a lot of MOT that every other movement or every movement has to have active representation on both sides and people doing stuff there. Now, Mr. Kaizo, okay, what are your closing thoughts? Right, you started us out with the
I'm
whole
a
abstraction
PhD.
of
Well,
your
if,
PA.
if I can ask one thing, I was going to ask MOT what's the topic on the Real Dana, but he's gone.
Yes, if you find out, let us know if you're googling it right now. But you started us all out with the abstractions, and you stayed a little bit too abstract. Okay, I want you to bring some TE to the table here, sir. I want you to talk about some A, B, C type steps, and you can be abstract with regards to maybe possibility. You can create a possible world where the manosphere is not able to change a law or is not able to get more people in STEM. It's not then also able to have a cohort of people that actually do know to shut up and maybe fund some other person, where now you have this division of labor where there are people whom are subject matter experts and do what they do. Basically we're talking about this crystallization and the forming of something, okay? Because if you just have water, it tends not to be, if it's not channeled properly. And even better, if you got some chunks of ice in there to swing it around, and all this takes energy, okay? So go ahead, give us a couple of minutes there of such abstractions.
Yeah, so I think I mentioned I saw the chess piece Game Changer mentioned a couple of things earlier, right? He said, okay, you can actually work with the people that are sort of favored by society to actually then be your mouthpieces, and that can somehow go quite a long way. I agree with that actually to a large extent. So some of the steps that we can do, first of all, we have to agree, what do we want? Obviously, we've got to have like a thing that is again part of our spirits and our souls. So let's say, for example, Dr. Thunder, he loves little boys, right? He cares about making sure that sorry, he loves black boys, right? He wants our future children. Come on, LAR, man. Okay, he loves black boys, right? He wants the future of our children to be protected. So what that means is, right, you got to figure out what everybody wants, and you got to agree to that standard.
What did I do? You okay?
Yeah. So, anyways, I'm back. Yeah. Anyways, we got to decide on something, right? So, black boys, right? That's something that we all care about over here. We need to agree on that. Game Changer, do you care about black boys?
Yes, I do care about the future of black males and boys. Yeah, black men and boys.
Okay, LAR, do you care about black boys?
Let's say we all agree. Then what? What is your next step in this?
Now we've actually agreed on a course of action, right? That means we have to put in situations, things that's going to actually allow, let's say, black boys to be protected. Oh my God. Man. Sorry, I can't.
So, okay, I'll land the plane there for you, and then we'll move on to LAR. So basically, if that is a goal, and you understand that it's not so hard to come up with a priority list as to, well, what is the thing that affects black boys the most right now, and that's also in play, right? Because don't just talk about crazy hopes and dreams. That it's in play in the sense that, for example, within the political arena, it's in the ballot somewhere, and it's going to be different ballots in different places, with different authorities having jurisdiction, being responsible for making the decision. Where some it's going to be you make a vote, or others it's about some particular local council office that you need to petition, or whatever, and everybody says, hey, okay, state of Colorado already has that fixed, but Ohio, needs that done. So how does that work over there in Ohio? Because that's the way it works over here in the United States. So that'll be the kind of thing, because until it gets decentralized in this the right kind of decentralization, right? The right kind of decentralization, which makes it local, right? You decentralize and then become local and then act. It never actually quite gets to action. But anyways,
Yeah, exactly. You have to be able to have people that are going to actually fight in the certain systems, political, go out there. Sure, okay, for example, let's say we know that black boys are actually failing when it comes to education. The amount of resources that they get, the amount of care, attention, all of that stuff is, let's say, disproportionate to what, let's say, girls get, right? In general, even affirmative action, right? We know that it disproportionately affected black men, right? AKA black boys all the way up to the men's section. So we got to be able to actually have these numbers. So someone has to obviously collate all these figures in a way that actually makes sense to the zeitgeist, the spirit of the times. We'll all talk about equality and all that kind of stuff. So if that's the case,
you put the right
assumptions
PR on it. Go ahead.
The assumptions have to be able to be disregarded, first of all. And when the assumptions are disregarded, we actually have to have people in the systems in any sort of real space and go out there and fight for us, right?
Yeah. Okay. Cool. And now I like that. I'll give you an example of the way this kind of fight tends to happen is in a lot of states, like let's say California, for example, it's their ballot initiatives that you go out there, you get signatures, and you put stuff on the ballot, and a lot of that happens around the issue of property taxing being used for schools. Okay. And I think that one of the more practical, now I've not really studied it to see what the actual effects will be, when you take it out of this idea space, but basically removing the tie that school funding now has with property taxes, because low income areas gonna have crappy schools. Well, why? It's because they don't have money. Literally, Kaizo, that's how it works in the United States, right? It's if you're not living in a place with big houses that pay a lot of property tax, your school is screwed. And that's just it. Okay.
So that's an example, though, right? You can actually petition to allow basic decentralized education.
Yeah, that is the idea. The idea is in California, such things do happen with ballot initiatives.
Yeah. In the UK, we have that.
In another state, is some other kind of a method. Right. But
in the UK, we have that. I grew up in a slum in the UK, but I went to the best school, etc. Again, based on that kind of decentralized system, whereby it's not just based on, okay, you're from this state, you're from this area, you're going to have the best schools, and someone else from the less developed regions going to have it. I think when it comes to children, there has to be, the perfect example, right? Education. When it comes to children, and we have, I think Mike V mentioned earlier that, black boys, unfortunately, we are behind in, actually in America and the UK, when it comes to literacy rates. So if that's the case, that's a simple example where we can tackle it. Get the black men, or rather boys, to have the same literacy as everybody else. That's going to put us at a certain advantage comparative to what we have right now.
Okay, good. I like nicely stated goals that are bite-sized enough, but still impactful enough, that are very direct to the so-called issues. And then you can find a nice path to work towards it. To the degree to which people care, they can see that as an opportunity to be a political entrepreneur of sorts. Now, LAR, what are your final thoughts on this? I know you talk about hearts and minds, and then I started out with the pushback of damsel in distress, and it ain't gonna work. So it is your last opportunity to kind of reiterate what you said with regards to men being able to win hearts and minds by some kind of appeal of, hey, here's my condition. Look what Keisha did to me.
The thing about all this at the end of the day is the Black Manosphere is basically like an information highway that's giving you people's life experiences and guiding you in certain directions, even to get employment. But when we talk about and that's the hearts and minds part. When I think about the damsel in distress, I actually think about the detractors, because people aren't, when it comes to this space, people aren't necessarily living in reality. Because everything that people say doesn't exist in this space exists in this space. But then they go, well, it needs to exist more. Well, you need to support it more. But you don't even show up for it until you see the people that you want not to support it. So the interesting thing about all this at the end of the day is, it's like, what I mean by reality is we have a particular experience. That is just what it is. But people come along and for some odd reason know we have a particular experience, and then cookie cutter, well, if you do what the white people do, and you do what the Indians do, and you do what the Asians do, and you do what the Jewish do, it's going to work the exact same way. Knowing good and well, we've already done that, and it hasn't worked the same way. So the space in itself has just been, this is the reality, and our solutions are based in our reality. And when you see people going, well, I don't like it. Well, even if you don't like it, that you can't refute that that's not the reality. So is it about the women all the time? Not really. But the problem is, guess what you like? It being about the women all the time. So whose fault is that it's about women all the time, and then you get off of the stream and then go, where Keisha at? I want to see Keisha. You're the problem. Now, you know, the ending of it, do you want to see the black men and black boys grow? Yeah. Do you want to see them grow into society? Yeah. But here's the problem. If you're a black man and you want black men to grow and benefit in society, why is it every time you see a young black man or a black man growing, you got an issue with it because it ain't the way you want it to be? So what you want, it's just a bunch of people, and I'm going to say this, I'm done. The Black Manosphere is a space, but there is a space outside of the Black Manosphere that like taking shots at the Black Manosphere while trying to be the Black Manosphere. And they're a bigger problem than this space. Because if they were doing all these great things that they would have been doing or supposed to be doing, they wouldn't keep being concerned about, let's see what the Manosphere is doing. Let's see what they're talking about. They ain't nothing. They ain't doing nothing. What you doing? Well, I heard you're not doing this, but they are doing that. Well, you ain't doing enough, for my opinion, so I don't like you. Well, why don't you just go gravitate to the people that, you know, are like-minded like yourself? And here's the issue with that. People don't want to say that everything is a niche group and a minority group. But we don't want to say the problem is a lot of these minority groups don't get along with each other, even though they're quote unquote elite. That's why they keep reaching outside of their own group. They can't even work with the people who are like-minded with them. So I'm sorry, you can't just, you know, be the Pied Piper of, you know, I'm great, y'all suck, you need to come over here with me. Well, what about the great people in your society that you work with? I hate them all. Not gonna work. You know, but that's my point.
Word them up, word them up, word them up. So, Dr. Thunder, you get to land us today, sir. You get to give us your closing thoughts. You get to also mention that next week will be on your channel, next Sunday, 4 p.m. Eastern Time. The place to be, the panel where you get the highest level conversation on the most relevant topics. Yes, I think that's what I said earlier. But Dr. Thunder, what are your closing thoughts on everything?
Yeah, this is interesting. So one of the points that was raised about women usually being more effective at getting their grievances heard and then sort of mobilizing and getting things done. That is one criticism that you hear women make of men, is that, hey, you know, don't blame us for getting our stuff together and getting things mobilized and put into place because you guys don't, you know, haven't done that. And there's an aspect of that I think that is valid. Okay. However, it has also to do with the way that we're oriented. Men are designed in a way to basically not complain about their own stuff, right? We tend to try to shield others from their issues, solve other people's issues, solve other people's problems. And usually what that means is that you tend to ignore your own issues. And you tend to, you know, hey, I can handle dealing with this. I'm not going to worry about this. Let me focus on trying to solve your issues. Right. And so the statement that men tend to sort of cater towards women and protect women, that's a good thing It's a good aspect of our nature. But the game change here has been with the, you know, girl power, which has totally changed the dynamic and made it so that it's actually, in many respects, to our detriment to lean towards women to try to help them with their issues. Matter of fact, the reason that girl power has gotten as far as it has is because men have facilitated it. If the men were the ones that were in control and they said, okay, we're going to give you X, Y, and Z, it was then therefore the men that actually facilitated this movement, the feminist movement. Now, I'm not against women's empowerment. I think women's empowerment is a good thing. What I'm against is female supremacy, and I'm against women's issues, female empowerment at the expense of the men, because the natural order of things is for the men to be selfish. I'm sorry, selfless towards their family, towards their women, towards society, to sacrifice themselves for the community. But if no one is looking out for the men, i.e., if the women are so self-absorbed and involved in getting their own, and even when things are being set up so that the men can get something, then the women are like, well, where's ours too? If that's always the thing, then that creates a really challenging dynamic in which to navigate. And so then therefore I actually think that it's sort of a disingenuous point to say, hey, well, the men, your issue is you don't mobilize and you don't get your stuff together. Well, if things were as they ought to be, that wouldn't be an issue, right? If we had others actually looking out for us as we look out for them, then it wouldn't be an issue. But I say that to say that as this message continues to travel, and it only takes 10% or something of the population to embrace it. It doesn't matter if it's mainstreamed or not. It just takes that percentage for there to become a sort of general awareness. And I think at that point, I think we'll, perhaps there will be some change to be had. To the answer to answer the final question, no. If you have no productivity, you have no power, doesn't matter how much complaining you do.
All right. So I believe you can catch me and Dr. Thunder. I'm going to be on his channel at Getting Ish Done on Wednesday, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time.
That's right.
Okay. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Okay. All-star panel as usual. We had a very great conversation today where we traversed the whole landscape of how to play the PR game when there are real ends that you need to have met, and there are ways of getting it that span from political to economic and whatnot, and how to rally the troops. Whom are the troops? What are the percentages that are reliable and all that kind of stuff, plus the beef, plus the drama, and the inside scoop brought to you by LAR. Always a pleasure, ladies and gentlemen. Until next time, peace. We're out.
in the den of iniquity. Vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment. What's a pity? Tomorrow never certain. What dwells behind the curtain? The face of evil smirking with that shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble, that either pop or topple. Many will fall and stumble. Let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso. Cannons could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Conditions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.